Welcome back to the channel. I'm the Fantasy Football Strategist, your NFL breaking news source, and the dynasty and redraft implications behind said breaking news. In today's video, Brondon Aiyuk declares that he would like to be traded. Please remember to like and subscribe. Let's get into it. In an article from NFL.com, Brondon Aiyuk requests trade from 49ers as wide receiver seeks new contract. The article states, Brondon Aiyuk's offseason of contractual discontent has reached a crossroads. The San Francisco 49ers wide receivers requested a trade per NFL insider Mike Garafolo. Aiyuk's request comes after an offseason filled with unsuccessful attempts to reach an agreement on an extension with the 49ers, who have been unwilling to engage in negotiations since May, per Garafolo. A 2020 NFL Draft first-round pick who is set to earn $14.124 million in the final year of his rookie contract decided to ask for a trade after a recent meeting failed to produce any movement, Garafolo added. So the 49ers, since May evidently, have not been willing to even speak to him about it. It seems as though they're just going to get their money's worth out of him and then let him walk. It's honestly a little bit surprising. I mean, they did draft Ricky Pearsall in the first round, so he'll probably take over and take his spot this next year, but Brondon Aiyuk's really good. It is a bit surprising. I'm pretty shocked. Usually this doesn't happen between players and teams. The article further states, Aiyuk's contract, however, went unaddressed, fueling an uncomfortable offseason in which the receiver went as far as to publicly list other teams, including Washington, Pittsburgh, etc., he could see himself joining if things don't work out with the 49ers. So he has listed a couple of teams. I'm not sure that the teams would be willing to trade for him per se, but that is, it honestly sounds like a bitter divorce. Looking at Brondon Aiyuk's measurables and metrics, he's 6'2", 205. He was drafted in the first round, as the article stated, 25th overall to the 49ers in 2020. He's only 26.3 years old, so he is at the peak of the bell curve of wide receiver production, at least historically. Looking at his metrics, they're pretty solid. He had a 4.50 40, which isn't that amazing, but it is 70th percentile among wide receivers. He also has a 98.6 speed score, which is in the 68th percentile. This combines your height, weight, and actual speed into one metric that really evens out the disparity between huge receivers and small receivers. Obviously, small receivers should definitely have the edge in total speed, but that's a solid score. Where he really hits, though, is in his burst. He has a 132.0 score, which is in the 92nd percentile among wide receivers. He also provides a 10.11 catch radius score, which is in the 70th percentile among wide receivers. So really, 68th percentile or better in every single one of these metrics, including 92nd percentile in burst score. Those are absolutely solid metrics for a wide receiver. Looking at a couple of advanced stats and his actual production, at least since 2021, it's quite impressive. He finished 5th overall in the entire NFL in fantasy points per route run with 0.59 this past season. He was even better in fantasy points per target, finishing with 2.37, which was good for 4th in the entire NFL. So on a per target basis, he is an elite wide receiver. His end-of-season totals also suggest that he's an elite wide receiver, and he's developing nicely from year to year. In his second year, he had 56 receptions for 826 yards and 5 touchdowns. Not otherworldly, but nothing to scoff at either. And that was just his second year. He really stepped it up in his third year. In his third year, he had 78 receptions for 1,015 yards and 8 touchdowns. That is a significant step up. But just wait, this past year, he really stepped it up. In his fourth year, he had 75 receptions for 1,342 yards and 7 touchdowns. He also increased his fantasy points per game every single one of these years. He was the 39th, 23rd, and this past year he was the 16th wide receiver in fantasy points per game. So a steady increase in fantasy points per game. If he can break into or right around the top 10 this year, either in this offense or if he were to get traded in another offense, he is going to have sky-high fantasy value. This guy is one of the best route runners and separators in the entire NFL. Looking at wide receiver contracts, they are really inflated as of recent. Justin Jefferson just signed for $35 million a year, including $110 million guaranteed dollars. That is absolutely ridiculous. That's more than quarterbacks used to make. A.J. Brown just signed a new deal. So did Amon-Ra St. Brown. Tyreek Hill, despite being paid $30 million annually, is looking for a new deal. Although I think he does deserve one. Then you have Jalen Waddle was just signed to an extension for $28,250,000 a year. Cooper Kupp has been one of the highest paid for a while. Devontae Smith just signed an extension. Really, a lot of these wide receiver contracts you see in this chart were very recent contracts. There's a good chance that Brondon Aiyuk is asking for really top-tier money. It's been reported that Brondon Aiyuk is looking for a contract right around or north of $20 million a year. That's right around the Chris Godwin, Keenan Allen range. I believe he deserves a contract like that. Looking at, first of all, those end-of-year total stats, as well as his increase in fantasy points per game, and especially his advanced metrics, this guy is the real deal. If he's not getting paid in San Francisco like he deserves to be paid, he is going to be paid handsomely in free agency. Or if someone trades for him, he'll absolutely get a massive extension. If I had to say where I think he probably deserves to be paid, I'd say right around the Devontae Smith, Cooper Kupp range, right around $25 million a year. He might settle for a little bit less, but I don't think he should. So let's look at a couple of teams that are in big need of help at wide receiver. First of all, we have the Denver Broncos. They still have Courtland Sutton. He's a solid X-wide receiver. Josh Reynolds is a fine Z receiver, I guess. He's preferably your fourth option, though, and not your second. Then you have Marvin Mims Jr., second-round pick this past year. He flashed some ability on a couple long catches and really kick returns, but really no production to speak of in his rookie year. Then you have Tim Patrick, another ACL tear for him. It's unfortunate for his career. They did draft Troy Franklin this year. He's actually college teammates with their rookie quarterback, Bo Nix. There might be a connection there. We'll see about him. He was really high on people's draft boards, but he fell in the NFL draft, and then he's kind of fallen out of favor with fantasy managers too. And then Lil Jordan Humphrey he's just a depth piece. Really, they need help in a big way at Z receiver and probably slot. Brondon Aiyuk can play both of these positions, but he most excels at Z receiver. He would be a perfect fit for them. Let's look at their cap space, though. Looking at the Broncos' cap space, they only have $7.6 million in cap space. So if they were to make a trade with the 49ers, they would probably have to get rid of a bloated contract and hand it to them. And they probably have to do a little bit of reworking around all of their contracts, or a couple at least, in order to facilitate this. But believe me, NFL teams are fantastic at doing this. The Saints have been in salary cap trouble for years, and they just keep pushing and pushing and pushing it back. It can be done, and they'll find a way. We'll see if the Denver Broncos end up trading for him, but they would really be helping rookie Bo Nix out in a big way if they did. Next, we have the New York Giants. They did just draft Malik Nabers at 6th overall. That's fantastic. He is going to be awesome, by the way. I don't mean that in a bad way. He's great. He's going to be electric. But after him, they are in trouble. They have Darius Slayton. He's always been a 600 to 700 yard player. Nothing special. Wan'Dale Robinson's decent from the slot and the Z. Not a world beater either. Second-year player Jalen Hyatt is just more of a straight-line field stretcher. Allen Robinson's been washed for a couple years, and Isaiah McKenzie's just a slot receiver, but he's not that amazing either, by NFL standards at least. They need wide receiver help in a big, big, big way. If they want to help support Daniel Jones, which they might not want to, they might just want him to fail so they can get rid of him, but if they do want to support him, they will try to trade with the 49ers. Looking at their cap space, they have $11.4 million in cap space. That wouldn't realistically be enough either to really be able to take on his contract, or at least an extension. But, once again, they could just get rid of a little bit of bloated cap space by sending some back to the 49ers, and then reworking a little bit of money from a couple players to push into the future in order to facilitate this. If they do believe in Daniel Jones and really want to support him, they will absolutely make every effort to make this happen. A third team that could really use help at wide receiver are the Buffalo Bills. They just got rid of Stephon Diggs, traded him away to the Houston Texans, leaving them dangerously thin. Khalil Shakur figures to be their starting slot receiver. He's a decent player, but he is definitely not a number one target. Then you have Keon Coleman, who would be a great big slot, but this whole team is slot receivers. So he's going to be playing X. Not a good fit for him. He's neither quick nor fast, struggles to separate, and struggles against zone coverage. Essentially everything you don't want in an X receiver. Then they did sign Curtis Samuel to play Z. He's a fine third option. Really, they need a number one wide receiver. Marquez Valdez-Scantling couldn't make it in Kansas City this past year, which says enough. Chase Claypool would rather be a model than play in the NFL, so that's all you need to know about him. And Matt Collins. To be fair, Matt Collins was featured on the Falcons with Arthur Smith this past year, so he's a really good wide receiver. But anyways, they're dangerously thin at wide receiver, though. Looking at their cap space, the Bills only have $10.1 million. So with them only having a little north of $10 million, they would once again, just like some of these other teams, have to send back some to the 49ers to take on. But that's enough cap space to where they could definitely make something happen if they wanted to and just push some money down the line in the future. If the Bills are serious about wanting to be contenders, and especially during the prime of Josh Allen's career after getting rid of his wide receiver one the past couple years, they'll do anything possible to make this trade happen. And another team that absolutely needs help at wide receiver and may potentially look to do something and potentially be in the race here are the New Orleans Saints. They have a stud wide receiver in Chris Olave. He's a low-end wide receiver one in real-life standards, but a great route runner and a fantastic receiver nonetheless. After that, though, they are pretty unproven. Rashid Shaheed plays well in spurts. He's really fast. Definitely not solidified as a legit number two receiver, though. We'll see if he grows a little bit this year. Cedric Wilson isn't anything, really. Neither is A.T. Perry, Equinemius St. Brown, or Bub Means. So they have a whole bunch of unproven wide receivers in this wide receiver core besides Chris Olave. They desperately could use a number two wide receiver. And Brondon Aiyuk would more than likely be their wide receiver one, but that duo would be among one of the best duos in the entire NFL. So looking at their cap space, they have a little bit over $12 million. They could trade a little bit of that back to the 49ers to take on, and then restructure some contracts and work some money up to the future to make this happen. And if they really want to give Derek Carr a fair shot, or at least potentially whoever they're going to bring in this next year or in the future at quarterback, if they want them to have a good situation, they will do everything in their power to make this trade happen. Looking at Brondon Aiyuk's ADP in dynasty drafts, specifically Superflex, he's going as the wide receiver 13 at the 312. I think that's pretty fair. He's going to be most likely a high-end wide receiver 2. if he gets some positive touchdown regression, he could maybe be a low-end wide receiver 1, at least in the context of being a 49ers wide receiver. If he goes to a receiver core that's barren with good quarterback play, who knows how high his upside could be. On the low end, at worst I could see him as a middling wide receiver 2. Either way, he's a solid wide receiver, and his wide receiver 13 price tag in Dynasty seems pretty fair. Looking at redraft, it's really the same thing. He's going as a 13th wide receiver off the board, but he's going at the 311. Really nothing to complain about. Like I said, he has the potential on the 49ers to be a high-end wide receiver 2, maybe a low-end wide receiver 1, and at worst, probably a mid wide receiver 2 this year. So that's what you're paying for. There's a decent chance he exceeds his ADP. He's not one of my candidates to do so just because of the 49ers' apparent reluctance to trade him and then the kind of crowded receiver room he's in. He might be a little bit inconsistent, but either way, he's a fantastic player in a great situation in the sense of it's a good scheme with a good quarterback as well. So, pretty solid, fair ADP. So, that's what I think about the Brondon Aiyuk contract situation. What do you think? Do you think he stays with the 49ers and signs an extension? Do you think he gets traded? Do you think he just is forced to ride it out as it's looking like and then find a new team this next year? Please, let me know in the comments section. With that being said, I'm the Fantasy Football Strategist, your NFL breaking news source, and the Dynasty and Redraft implications behind said breaking news. Please remember that I am building a library of information with which you can use to dominate your Redraft and Dynasty Fantasy Leagues in 2024 and beyond. Please remember to like and subscribe. It would mean the absolute world to me. Thank you and have a good day.